one of the most objectionable and silly things that went on during the first election of Barack Obama was the idea that he was palling around with terrorists like Bill Ayers, that he would, after he got elected, give them a room, I guess, in the West Wing or something like that. But we have some recent footage of Bill Ayers. Let's find out what Barack Obama's pal thinks of him now.
Isn't Barack Obama, as the sole authority for drone use, engaged in terrorist activity?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Do you think Barack Obama should be put on trial for war crimes?
Absolutely. Every president in this century should be put on trial. Every one of them.
For war crimes?
For war crimes, absolutely.
In The Hague?
Absolutely. Every one of them goes into office, an office dripping with blood, and then adds to it. And yes, I think that these are war crimes. I think they're acts of terror.
It's like the worst carpool in the history of America. That poor son of a bitch in the back seat. It's like, can we just drive to work,
show.
fellas?
Have you ever seen the show?
Yeah,
before?
no.
Yeah, he drives. It's Charlie Stone just drives somebody and has a conversation.
Yeah. Oh, right.
It's called Morning Commute, and they commute.
No. It's cool.
It's like Cash Cab, but not as exciting.
It's not as exciting, right? And
Taxi Cab Confessions.
Except everyone's a loser.
Right. And when you get a question wrong, clearly you don't have to get out of the cab.
Yeah, that's true. So if you know anything about the history of Bill Ayers, of course, I doubt many of you are going to be surprised that he's somewhat radical, actually. I mean, he's got the earring and everything. So Barack Obama's pal, not quite his pal anymore. Now, what's interesting is that while I've characterized this as obviously an extreme reaction to what both Obama and the previous presidents have done, on some level, I don't really disagree with him that many of our past presidents have clearly, by the standards we would apply to other countries' administrations, engaged in war crimes. The killing of the extrajudicial killing of citizens of other countries or our countries, prosecuting wars where obviously things that if other countries had done some of the things we've done at war in the past few decades, we would label them as war crimes. So is this an extreme position?
No, it's not an extreme position. It's a largely irrelevant position, I suppose. Yes. But it's
and I would say I would disagree. I think it's extreme because you can't get much more extreme than what Bill Ayers is saying. So the position, if extreme is defined as not being within the mainstream of opinion.
Yeah, but the question is,
is it inaccurate?
Should it be outside the mainstream? Or should we just stop prosecuting heads of state for war crimes because they're the heads of state and they're trying to defend their states in whatever way they see fit? Sometimes they're defended with extreme aggression as a preemptive strike. But you could. We could
also just stop going to war, and then we wouldn't have to worry about it.
That's outside the mainstream.
Yeah. Well,
or more cynically than what you said, I think we should be honest and state our actual position, that we will prosecute foreign leaders of countries we're not allied with, but not our allies and not ourselves. We are allowed to do this. Israel might be allowed to do this. Other close allies of ours might be allowed to engage in some of these actions, but not countries that we're not allies with.
Look, first of all,
I'm not saying that's good. I'm saying that seems to be our standard operating procedure.
What makes it an extreme position is that there is a reasonable position to hold that Obama and Bush and maybe Clinton and the first Bush should maybe all have been tried, and Reagan, and everybody, as he says, could be tried for a war crime. But that's not a conversation that you have on the morning drive to Starbucks. Like, it's incredibly complicated, and as always, what is left out of these conversations, not to minimize what Bill Ayers said, and he certainly has a right to his opinion, and he's thought about it too, but there is a counter argument, and one thing that is left out frequently in almost all of these debates when you take a very strong, aggressive position is that there's going to be somebody else on the other side who's going to make a different argument, and that argument's going to be reasoned too. And so, should Obama be tried with war crimes? I would be interested in a debate with Bill Ayers and a constitutional law professor who's sympathetic to that argument, but who would argue against him, because it would be an interesting argument. Yeah. But that's not going to happen in the car.
Yeah, I don't know.
That guy in the back seat won't open his fucking mouth.
Oh, that's the problem.
I've always felt, though, like, yes, there come a time when a president might feel like, if I don't do X, if I don't engage in this action, then Americans might die, we might lose this war, something like that. And maybe, I'm talking about illegal actions, by the way, and maybe you make the decision at that time, this needs to be done or the nation will be harmed. I think that's perfectly fine to make that decision, but then you should be prosecuted for it. And if you're a good, strong, patriotic American, maybe saving thousands of American lives or stopping the downfall of the country or something like that is worth you spending the rest of your life in jail.
Well,
I think that's the noble and
I really disagree. I think being president in this democracy is a nuanced job. I think nobody knows what it's like going to sleep. Barack Obama didn't know it until he was president, going to sleep at night, knowing that, that something you did that day may put somebody in harm's way in a country that you hadn't heard of before you became president. So I can't pretend to know what that's like, but there are, when you are the president of the United States, there are things, and it's part of the job, I'm not saying the person, but the job, that you, by default, unfortunately, because we do go to war, because we are an aggressive democracy, because of that, there are things that you're going to do that to a citizen, to a civilian, seem as if, like you're saying, that this guy should be prosecuted. He took the risk, he saved the lives, but he should go to jail for it. I think there has to be a different standard when it comes to the way the president operates and does his job.
Cenk brings up a point that, like, there are certain things that just offend your sense of sensibility and fairness, even in war. And what gets me every time are double tap drone strikes. That you have a drone strike, I get it, you're prosecuting an enemy. Drone strikes or dropped from a bomb manned by people, that's a distinction that it's not a distinction that strikes me as terribly interesting. Then when people come to save those guys and rescue people, and then you have another strike on them, that strikes me as meeting a standard for which violates terms of war of which I'm not entirely familiar with. And we're led to believe that that has happened, and if it's happened intentionally, and that was the idea, to sort of send a message, then that would constitute something that I would say is worth looking at.